Is not that boring. It's all very important. So ladies and gentlemen, I am actually bringing you to the final session this morning. It takes us to the space of the future of delivery by land, by sea, by air. I am moderating this session, so I'm going to ask our panelists to come join us. All right, we will jump right into things. This is going to be a general question for everyone. By way of introduction, tell us a little bit about what problem you're working on, trying to solve, and any milestones that you've been able to accomplish and reach so far. We'll start on the far end with Olaf.
Sure, I'm like the odd one out on the panel in that I'm a VC. I think of the role of a VC a little bit like a conductor in an orchestra, where you've got everybody playing the instruments and the conductor doesn't actually have an instrument to play. But at the same time, without the conductor, things don't necessarily always work out so well. My goal is to work with founders in order to first understand their business, be a sounding board, to make introductions, to give critical feedback. That's, I think, the value of a VC. And within the domain that I focus on, I think there's a big advantage to understanding that domain and being able to add value. And so we focus on the transformation of the real economy, and a huge part of that is what we're going to talk about today, which is the logistics value chain, taking goods from a factory and then delivering them to endpoints, to end customers from A to B.
Great. Go ahead, Chris.
Thanks, Vivian. I'm Chris, co-founder and CFO of Neolix. And we've been focused on level 4 autonomous vehicles for logistics since 2018. This is a whole new species that it does not have a steering wheel and a passenger seat. So it's you can think it's just an empty van. And up to now, we have already successfully deployed 13,000 vehicles worldwide in 300 different cities. Mostly in China, but in this year, we successfully earned the permission from the Abu Dhabi and Dubai, and also in Lisbon. So we're working on our overseas business. I'm really looking forward to let you to see our vehicles in Riyadh, maybe next year. So basically, what we do is we develop our own algorithms and end-to-end model, and we design and manufacture our own vehicle. We apply for the road permission, and finally, we deploy those vehicles on the open road to serve the logistics scenarios. And right now, our customers, including the logistic companies like China Post, like Jingdong, the JD.com, are also including the e-commerce platform like Nuwen.com. We also start business with McDonald's and KFC to help them to transport food from the distribution center to the cafeteria, to the canteen. And also we start doing business with IKEA to help them to move furniture from the warehouse in the urban area, in the rural area, and then move it to the shop inside the CBD. So that's basically what we're working on.
Great, thank you. Curt, tell us what problems you're solving.
Sure, I'm Curt from Hextronics. We make battery swapping drone stations. So essentially a drone takes off from one of our nests, it goes and performs a mission, responds to a 911 call, scans some train tracks or an oil field, and then comes back to the nest, and we swap the battery so that it's ready to go again in just a couple of minutes. So it's kind of like a coffee machine, but for robots. And some key metrics that we track is reliability and field performance. And so we have systems with over 100,000 cycles deployed, and then right now across our fleet, we're doing a flight roughly every 6 minutes. And that's across the world in over 26 different countries. We're just a small team based out of Miami, but we're here today. Thank you.
Congratulations. Please, Henry.
Thanks, Vivian. My name's Henry, and I lead policy at DoorDash Labs. So at DoorDash, we are working to power local economies. And for us, we ask ourselves fundamental questions like, how do we improve that by getting 1% better every single day? And so about 7 years ago, we founded DoorDash Labs, and autonomy was always at the heart of that focus. And so today, what we're looking at doing is launching a multimodal platform that really focuses on autonomy. So this multimodal platform would include dashers, which would be the backbone of our operation today and will continue to be so, but also delivery robots, which include our ground-based programs on the sidewalk, and also our purpose-built delivery robot called Dot, which some people may have seen, but also drones and autonomous vehicles as well. So the idea is having all of these on one universal platform. You can get safer, faster, more sustainable results that really have an impact locally. And this idea of multimodalism is really the future of what we're trying to do at DoorDash. This was a very exciting year for us. We had a number of announcements on partnerships across this multimodal platform, and we're really looking forward to next year when we're going to be seeing a lot of the results.
Thank you. And lastly, Todd.
Yeah, thank you. And to stay with the multimodal format, my name is Todd Graetz. I am the co-founder and CEO of a company called Aerolane. We were started to essentially transform the cost of moving all objects. And specifically, we wanted to do something that is the best of rail, the best of ground trucking, and the best of air all in one. And we decided to do that by creating a technology we call the AeroCart, otherwise known as towed cargo gliders. So basically trains in the sky, planes towing other planes, either existing planes or new technology planes that we've created, all on the website. We've recently signed an order with a major U.S. freight airline. It's a real order. We actually have to deliver real product. We have to deliver it next year. We're very excited about that. But also previous to founding Aerolane, I'm a known pioneer and trailblazer in the world of drones in the United States. My team either created or co-created all of the commercial firsts in the United States Drone Organization, and we're heavily involved with rulemaking for Section 333, Part 107, and now Part 108. So very, very familiar with rail, air, and ground, and looking forward to engaging.
That's great. So we heard a lot already in this introduction about the amazing innovations happening right now. Chris, I'm going to turn this first question to you. Where is autonomy make sense and maybe where it doesn't make sense? You announced already some interesting forms factors that you're already using for deliveries. Tell us about, again, where it makes sense and maybe where it doesn't.
Sure. Basically, when we look into the logistics, we can see it forming by three procedures: the transportation, then the picking up and drop off, and then the handling. Means you need to take the goods and going upstairs. So for the autonomous vehicle, when we replace the human driver, normally the driver should be taking responsible to the pick up, drop off the stuff. So by replacing the driver, we need to think thoroughly about the procedure. Otherwise, we may even make the cost higher rather than help the customer to achieve cost down. So basically, what we are good at, and what we research a lot is how to combine the transportation also with the autonomous loading, unloading mechanism on it, like making a container, standardized container. And for the handling, this is kind of impossible for us. We think that should be served by the humanoids or the drones to help them to just go directly on the rooftop or to the specific floor.
So I'm going to follow up with Henry. You talked about being multimodal, having dashers, having the bots, et cetera. What have you learned so far in, again, kind of what works and what doesn't work? When do you pull which lever to use which type of delivery?
Yeah, it's a great question. So again, we had a number of announcements this year. We announced partnerships with Coco Robotics, Serve Robotics, and then on the drone side, Flytrex and Wing. And so all of them have different use cases. What we've learned is that, autonomy is not going to solve every problem. For us at DoorDash, we're really fortunate. We have been successful. We're doing 8 million deliveries a day. That is a lot of volume. And so for us, we're using autonomy to really complement fulfillment that dashers wouldn't ordinarily take, right? That also allows us to reduce congestion on roads. It has all these different kinds of benefits that we're starting to realize. And what you also understand is that not every order is the right tool in the order in the toolkit. And so for us at DoorDash, we've had a lot of learnings here. I think the most important thing is that you have to have different types of methods for delivery. And for us, it's about expanding that in the future.
Great. And so, Curt, you had mentioned being deployed already in so many different countries. Tell us a little bit about what infrastructure challenges maybe you face, or how we can expand globally to make sure that this innovation that we're seeing success in some areas can go ahead and expand globally.
Sure. So, well, I got into this whole business because I asked a variety of different people who were flying drones, providing drone services, or building tools with drones, essentially what their biggest kind of problem or need was. And they came back saying, look, we need to use our systems to the maximum extent, and we make these automatic missions that do this automatic process, but they're really only as automated as the person that has to go there and swap the battery. So the infrastructure that we provide through our products is just a drone station that enables this continuous and kind of constant uptime flight. And it also enables for an infrastructure of kind of daisy chain or lily padable drone stations where you can do kind of cross city deliveries if possible, or just continuous uptime flights. So a big component of this infrastructure, just like we were talking about earlier with electric vehicles that needing charging stations along the way, very similar for drones and small aircraft as well. So that's what we're working on.
Todd, I have a follow-up question here, a little bit related, and a little bit outside the box, but tell me, as cities are working with these regulations, you talked about being very involved in all that, what are some of the challenges that you've already seen in the industry, and what opportunities lie ahead to make sure this continues to grow? Lots of challenges, but what do you think are the most important things that you work with regulators on to continue growth?
I think the thing that was our secret to success in my previous life at BNSF Railway and also in all the advisory and rulemaking committees I was part of is that you need to find a route to yes. And a lot of these municipalities and states and counties and feds or governments around the world, CAAs, what have you, there isn't Saudi Arabia seems to me is the exact opposite. There's a political will, there's mental clarity, there's capital, there's need, there's everything coming together. I'm just in awe of this country. In other parts of the world, and especially at the city and state level, they have to have the decision that they want new technology, and they have to understand they won't always have a regulation that supports it. It may support, it may not support, you don't know, or it prohibits it. They have to be willing to have the political will to move through that very, very quickly, because without it, it stifles innovation and interest. And as you can see, capital and innovation goes where it's welcome.
Yeah, and that's actually a perfect segue to our next question. So you have to have that political will, you have to have the route to get there. Let's talk, Olaf, about the money to make it happen. So tell us a little bit about what you think is the biggest economic shift, and again, how these startups and companies can make sure that we are collaborating with the VCs or the right groups to get that money to move forward.
Yeah, I think like an important point about the real economy, the space we're all operating in, is that it's pretty hard. So there was all this hype in 2016, I don't know who lived through that, around autonomous vehicles. In 2021, there were going to be autonomous vehicles everywhere. We're in 2025, and Neolix has deployed some, but on the like we're kind of in the path of productivity now. But it's been a long ride, and the reality is, in the real economy, the big challenge is that you have to deal with the real world, which includes the regulations that Todd was pointing to, but also involves the long tail of complexity. Basically, Waymo has this example of a lady chasing ducks in an electric wheelchair with a broom as one of the training examples, and that's the kind of thing you find in a home if you're doing robotics, which is a space we're super focused on right now, or if you're building autonomous vehicles, or any other kind of system in this world, is you have to solve for this long tail of complexity. And what we've done as an investor, and we've been extremely successful, our fund is a top 1% performer with like 60% IRR, and we've done that by being extremely focused on pragmatism, on ideas that are achievable within a realistic time frame. So a lot of investors are hoping that things will happen that aren't necessarily going to happen. And what we look for is the pieces in the logistics value chain and upstream on the manufacturing side where things are achievable in a realistic time horizon where there's leverage. So on the one hand, you've got AI that's pouring into the space. You've got AI for logistics, a company like Happy Robot, which we've backed, which is bringing voice agents and other forms of AI into coordination in the logistics value chain. We've backed a company called Agency Robotics, which is doing sortation in the distribution centers. And then we're also looking at pragmatic solutions. We're investors in Todd's company, which I think is much more pragmatic than anything you're seeing on the VTOL side, which is a hope and a dream that you're going to get all these regulatory approvals. And what Todd is building is a realistic vision of an incremental improvement that actually has way more transformative potential for the logistics value chain. And I'll give a shout out to 2 other portfolio founders, because 4 of them came to this conference, and I was very excited for them to see Saudi Arabia and to engage with this ecosystem, which I think is very forward-looking and engaged with technology. The one is Humble Robotics, which is doing autonomous vehicles for the logistics value chain in ports and on the roads. And the other is Finn, which is doing a software layer which creates leverage for coordinating last mile delivery, creating both a marketplace and a SaaS solution for that. So we're looking at these very pragmatic ideas, and we've had a lot of success in backing great founders that are realistic about transforming the world. And you have to do it step by step, but in that process, you can actually bring about massive transformation.
And I think part of that success, I would imagine, in what the startups and companies have to prove to the funders is what works and what doesn't work. And like the first question I asked Chris is kind of a follow-up. You talked about IKEA deliveries, KFC, a lot of different options. How do you, as a company, determine what data do you look at to decide, okay, we're going to go down this path or that path or the other path? What information gives you the path to decide how you're going to use your autonomous vehicles?
We think the first principle for the logistic would be cost down. Well, that's the biggest difference between the robo-van, which is our segment, and the robotaxi. Because robotaxi, you need to focus on not only cost, you need to focus on the experience. Yeah, no passenger want to feel like sharp brake and sharp acceleration, but for goods, it's just fine. So basically, when we're looking at what customer we can serve, it's a mathematical problem. It's about calculating the TCO, which means the total cost of ownership. So basically, all the logistic customers, they will count the cost of the vehicle, cost of the labor, cost of the energy, and then divided by its lifetime mileage expectancy. So when they do the calculation, they will find out that their cost would be, in China, the number would be like 70 cents per kilometer. Yeah, if we try to do some business like Uber Freight in China, your price would be about 70 cents per kilometer. And from our current technology, we can reach about 30 cents per kilometer. So that's the reason why the customer will eager to find us and to use our product.
So Todd, let's talk about air freight and talking about economics, and how do you see the work that you do shifting logistics?
Well, first of all, those are my 2 favorite subjects, economics and air freight. And how do we see, I'll give you my perspective, but just all the concepts on the stage. You know, I think the thing you can't ever forget is what we're trying to do is we're trying to maximize the availability of freight availability and reduce the cost as fast as possible, especially when you get outside of, say, the United States that is a very, very mature, and other countries that have a very mature road network, rail network, right, air network. Developing nations or island nations or elsewhere that have a real economic drag because their logistics costs are so high, and that drives everything else. It's also natural inflation built in. We're focused on reducing that. I think the key thing for all of these mobility concepts is not to forget the fact that if you just focus on what we did, for example, cost and capacity, if you just laser focus on that, and then almost the technology and everything else is set aside, you actually transform things for not only your customers, but the markets you're identifying. And I think that's what I know that's partially answering your question, but also kind of making our statement but for all of us here and many of us at this conference, it's really that. It's mobility is a service, and how is a mobility an enabler for economic activity? And if you focus on reducing the cost of that logistics segment, then you benefit everything downstream.
All right, I'm going to go back to Olaf with another question about money. And tell us, what do you think is going to be an economic shift, maybe reflect on what's happened in the past, as you did already, but looking forward 5 years, what does the economic landscape look like for innovation? If you can answer that, it's the million-dollar question.
Well, I think we kind of have two cycles playing out. So on the one hand, you've got Waymo deploying now, which is much closer to the public markets, to the place where we're focused on. And we're actually focused on a time horizon more like 10 years rather than just 5 years. I think over the next few years, you're going to see autonomy actually commercialize. So if you think about what's happening in the world of tech right now, there's a thing called LLMs. You might have heard of them. And they're transforming the world. But that technology was birthed through something called AlexNet that then became a key inspiration for the autonomous vehicle teams. Was kind of, a lot of the development was kind of accelerated through the autonomous vehicle space, came through LLMs, and is also now feeding back into that space. There's another thing that's spinning out, which is this excitement about robotics. Tesla, if you want to try and justify that valuation, it's a story about robots much more than it is a story about autonomous vehicles only. And so you've got these different technologies that are in different stages of maturity. So we've got autonomous vehicles starting to become productive, driving value. You've got incremental technologies that are very pragmatic, like Todd's technology, that are solving real problems and reaching commercialization. And then you've got things on the software side, like AI, that's feeding into these value chains because it's a general purpose technology. That's why it's so exciting. It applies to everything, and it also applies to coordination. It applies to regulation. If you need to read thousands of pages of regulation in order to figure out how to deploy your DoorDash sidewalk robots across different states, LLMs can help you with that. If you're coordinating in the logistics value chain or selling vehicles, these technologies have applications in that space. And now there's this nascent thing happening with robotics, where we hope also that the technology for robotics can become more general purpose to solve the kinds of problems that Neolix is dealing with, which is how do we get this package from this autonomous vehicle into the person's house? It seems so simple. You're so close to the door, and yet all the stairs and the little children and the dog that's going to bite the leg of the humanoid or the dog-like robot that wants delivered, it's all going to create complexity and create lots of challenges. And so intelligence writ large is very hard to do in the physical world because of this long-tail problem that I pointed out. And so a lot of the hope and the investment in NVIDIA chips on the very bottom of the value chain and all of this data science and research and data capture and training is in order to solve more and more generalizable problems so that we can create more and more economic value and then plug it into particular use cases in order to drive economic value.
And I think there's definitely a demand. We're seeing that already with many of the pilots happening. But all of that takes money. It takes political capital and will, regulations, et cetera. So Henry, this one's for you. How do you work with cities, regulators, cities, countries, et cetera, to get them to buy into these concepts, to these innovations, and partner with you to bring this forward?
Yeah, that's a great question, Vivian. So it's not just about partnership. You really have to think about it as deep partnerships, right? I think the human element is really important. So today, companies that are looking to deploy and partner with cities, they really have to hire the right people. Not only do you have to have people who understand the policies in place, the laws on the books, but people who can communicate, people who can listen first, and people who can really relate to what the local regulators are trying to achieve. And so I think that's the first piece. I think then you have to take it a step deeper. How can you sort of co-design with these cities? How can you look to deploy, but really figure out ways in which they can have a hand in the process? You have to have feedback loops, so it's not just about listening. You have to be able to take in that information, reorganize, replan, and then present that back to the city. This is not an easy process. DoorDash is doing this now. And fortunately, we've got the right people, but this takes time. Because we've had success in many other verticals, we have the ability to, really go about this in the right way. Some startups don't have the ability to do that, which is unfortunate. I think also you really have to think about the political players at the table. You have to really understand, when are they up for re-election? How can you, have a vested interest in their future, especially if they are a welcoming environment? You also have to help them help themselves. For instance, a lot of what we do when we go into a city that's interested, we give them sort of a playbook of what has worked in other cities. We often have them talk with their neighbors, especially, if there's interest there. We think about a regional approach. Again, this takes time. It's not often what our engineers want to hear, because for them, it's, the technology works, so it's taking so long, right? But you really have to think about the long-term impact. And then speaking of impact, you really have to qualify and quantify, what it really means to deploy the technology and be able to explain it in a way in which the policymaker understands. Not an easy task.
So I'm going to turn to Curt, because Curt's talked about the success he's had in lots of different countries. Henry just talked about those challenges, but what do you see, Curt, as the missing piece? What do regulators maybe not quite understand, or what are the things that they need help educating on?
Sure, well, this is definitely a tough one. But I think it's some level of cohesion between everyone. Of course, it's always difficult. I mean, in the U.S., the regulations move at different speeds or in different directions as other countries, and even with Part 108 that just is kind of unfolding in the U.S., there's already thousands and thousands of comments that are going to only delay it further and further down the line. And something that at least I see is guiding it is kind of private interests, groups that want to win in markets and want to kind of take over new verticals and deliver great products and services to customers. And I think it's kind of like a natural progression that's just going to find its way through over time. But really, the way that we've had some success in these other countries is by, in some level, selling to cowboys. Selling to the people that say, screw the regulation, I'm just going to fly this thing in my backyard and figure out how it works, and then build a case to then submit that to the regulators saying, look, I've proven this technology, I can use it for X, Y, and Z reason, now let me fly this in my own terms. And so I think, yeah, it's all coming together somewhat naturally through the growth of just different economies.
So ask forgiveness maybe sometimes the way to go. Okay,
Olaf. Can I add something to
Yeah,
that?
please.
Because he used my favorite term, cowboy, and one person's cowboy is another person's Bedouin, and you're basically surrounded by the will of a Bedouin tribe that decided we're going to build something. So those cowboys can actually get a lot done.
Chris, let me ask you a question. What do you think are some of the biggest bottlenecks that you've encountered? Again, along those same lines of working with regulators, what's been the challenge really that maybe you've found the way to solve, or you're still working on solving?
The bottleneck for the robovan industry is truly the relationship with the government, with the supervisors. So in China, what we have done is we discover a mechanism and we hand it over to the government to let them to see that our vehicles are safe. So basically, we need to report whether the vehicle have any accidents or have any like sharp brakes or sharp accelerator. Basically, it's the same thing what the U.S. companies do to report to the NHTSA. So that data help the government to understand that your vehicle is at least is much safer than the human drivers, about like 50 to 100 times. But when we try to expand this thing to overseas market, we'll find it especially hard, because all the things should be moved across the border, like local server, local data, local model, local regulation, all the things should be local. So that's the very big obstacle when we're encountering with, especially when it compared to the EV, to the traditional vehicles. You don't face it with such problem about privacy and the cybersecurity stuff. But for the autonomous vehicle, humanoids and drones, I think definitely that would be the bottleneck.
Great. Olaf?
Yeah, I think if you zoom out, there's a huge societal problem that's faced in America and perhaps also in Europe, which is that we've become very litigious as societies. Mm-hmm. So if you just look at young people's sentiment politically, there's a lot more extremism. I think a lot of this is being driven by the fact that as a person in my demographic or younger, it's very hard to afford a home. And there are lots of people that bought homes during a time when it was easier to build, but it's now become really difficult to build. I think this is obviously an arbitrage for countries like China, Saudi Arabia, where you can act faster on regulation. I think there are other strengths of an economy like the United States, but this is a very cruxy and difficult challenge. And this is a forum that brings together the private sector and the public sector. And I think this is why it's important, is that it's very easy to get tripped over your own shoelaces of, there's this kind of point of like most of the leadership of America for the last 100 years has been a lawyer. And in China, they've all been engineers, right? And I think this is reflected in the way that America thinks about litigation, policy, regulation. And there's a challenge that when you just think about things through the eyes of the law, what you become is risk averse. You try to prevent things bad from happening rather than ensuring that good things happen. And at some point, that starts compounding and getting to the situation that I think we're in right now, which is already quite bad. And unless something dramatic happens in order to course correct, it's only going to get worse. And nobody's going to be the one person to blame, but it's a collective action kind of problem. But I think we all have to take small risks in order to push things forward, because if we don't have that vision, we're going to end up in a much worse situation for our children and the generations that come.
So this question is going to go to both Henry and Todd, so you all can decide who wants to go first. You've both talked about working with regulators. You've both talked about some success and challenges. What do you think would be advice to others who might be startups or trying to break into a new market? What does a successful regulatory partnership look like? Y'all have touched on that a little bit, but I just want to get into a little bit closer, some advice maybe for those who are interested in starting up some new innovative ways to do things.
No way I'm going to follow Todd.
Smart.
Number one, adopting a no surprises approach, which has been controversial in the past. You always want to keep a trick up your sleeve, so to speak. You want to keep your cards close to the vest. But I think we're in a new sort of time where you can no longer do that. There has to be transparency. There has to be accountability in the way that perhaps you didn't have to in the past. And so all of these are ways in which you can build trust. Trust is one of the most important currencies in doing this work. And if you lose it, it is really difficult to get it back. And so you want to do everything you can on the front end to really build that trust. So it's about being honest. For us at DoorDash, there are a couple principles that we try to live by. One of them is called responsible deployment. What that means, safety first, so bringing the regulator in, letting them understand our approach to safety. And then, again, I talked a little bit about getting 1% better, making sure that throughout that engagement of dealing with regulators, you are improving the relationship and educating them on how the technology works and how the relationship can move in a positive direction.
Great.
Yeah, Henry's right, so I'm following better answers. But the thing I'll add to this too, my secret sauce is when I started in the aviation regulation space, I didn't know a thing about aviation regulation. So I went out and hired the absolute best former senior regulators and field office people to educate me, and you're absolutely right, no surprises. That was the number one thing, total and complete transparency, and then that builds trust to the point when a lot of people would sit on the sidelines and say, why is this railroad getting all these one-of-a-kind authorities, and why are you letting them do this and that? My co-founder, Curt, at Amazon Prime Air, couldn't get anything off the ground, and we're flying multi-hundred-pound drones hundreds of miles at a time in the middle of the night, flying them from multiple states away. And it wasn't that Amazon didn't have an impressive government affairs organization. They had one of the best. And it wasn't that there was anything wrong. It's just that we built such a transparent and trust-based relationship on the fact that we were a safety organization and so were they. So the thing I'd add to that, the only thing I could add, is when developing these relationships, you never have to be right all the time. You can actually be wrong most of the time. Let those regulators stop being regulators and become safety partners. I actually don't, whenever I go to the FAA, was just there a few days ago, I remind them of that. They're not regulators, they're safety partners. Establish that open channel and you'd be amazed at what you can get done. And I think the last thing is stepping away from the regulators back to the most important thing. Understand regulators, they answer to elected officials who in many cases are well-meaning but heavily uninformed. And you need to understand that these regulators in the back of their mind, we said this earlier, they're thinking about their jobs, they're thinking about their futures. Understand there's personal currency there involved. And if you can wrap all that up, borrow a lot of what DoorDash has done in DC, you'll build the relationships and get things done.
That's great advice. I hope everyone follows up on that. I've sat on both sides of that coin and agree with you wholeheartedly. We are running short on time, so we're going to go ahead and finish with a rapid fire question. What region, this is going to be for each of you, and we may have repetitive answers, but what region do you think is going to lead the way in the automated delivery, say in 5 years or maybe 10 years? What region is going to be the key region? Is it going to be Europe, North America? Is it going to be right here?
I think it's not going to be Europe. I think the United States has deep structural advantages in terms of capital, technology, and innovation. And China has advantages in terms of deployment velocity and also commoditization, bringing down costs. And I think those are the two races that are going to play out. I think what's happening in Saudi Arabia, for instance, is a battleground between these two kinds of approaches. I don't think it's super clear what's going to work out. I think America is going to build really good technology that's expensive, that solves complex problems that the US market can afford and many other markets will benefit from. And China will keep them honest, bring down cost, be pragmatic, and deploy. And I think that's the tension you're going to see. I don't know if it's super clear which way it's going to go, because I think both have advantages. It's like a fight between two sides that have their own strengths and they're very different.
Okay.
Or Saudi Arabia sitting here on real currencies, real money, a real economy, and can smoke them both if they want to. I mean, I've never sat on a piece of property, call it this wonderful country, and realized that they have every capability of becoming absolutely without. I mean, I've never seen anything like it in my life. It's just amazing.
Chris, any thoughts?
Yep. For me, I'll be voting for the MENA area.
Okay.
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, but as my perspective, the Chinese government and US, they all have some serious burden towards the social economy thing, like the labor union or the jurisdiction of all the things. So if you want to choose one country that can take the leap, like in the next 5 to 10 years, I think would definitely be the country in the Middle East, because they'll have enough motivation and less burden to doing this, and also enough resources.
Curt?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely agree with what's been said here. I think the ones with transparent cowboys.
Henry?
Well, +1 to Todd and what he said about the potential of Saudi Arabia. However, DoorDash is a global company and is headquartered in North America. There you have it.
There you go. All right, excellent. We do appreciate everyone's input here today. I want to thank you all. It's really, I'm excited about the future. The future is already here, but what will still be to come is amazing. Thank you all for great insight. This is the last panel for the day before lunch, so I'm going to invite you all to enjoy lunch. Make sure you come back, check out the program. We have lots still to come. Thank you very much.